Here, we're looking at a model of the Earth. Now, we call this a globe. And as the Earth is spinning around, causing us to have day and night, it's also orbiting around the sun. But that's not all. We also have a moon that we sometimes see at night and sometimes during the day. Now, this moon would be about this size if we wanted it to be to scale. Now, this moon is orbiting around the Earth as the Earth is going around the sun. But not only that, but the moon is also spinning. This, depending on where it's at in its orbit, is why we have phases of the moon. The side of the moon that is lit up is the side that's always facing the sun, because that's where the light is coming from. Which means the back side of the moon is always dark. That's the part that's in shadow. You see, there's no atmosphere on the moon, so there aren't any gases, no plants, and no water to absorb any of the light. So when the sun comes shining on the moon, it reflects that light really well. And that makes the moon incredibly bright at night. So moonlight is actually just reflected sunlight. Now, if I use a moon of about this size, it's about to scale to the Earth back there. And using my classroom, we have about the right distance for how far away this moon needs to be. To allow you to better see which side of the moon is being lit up and which side is actually dark, I've actually colored the back side of this moon black. So let's turn on the sunlight and see what that does for our moon phases. Now, from this spot, the side of the moon that is facing the sun is still half lit up, and the side that's facing away from the sun is dark. But to us from Earth, it looks like only half of the moon is being illuminated. We call this a half moon, or the first quarter. As we travel farther back, we start to see more and more of the lit up portion. Now we only see a small sliver of the shadow. The light still is on the right side, meaning that it's waxing, and because it looks like it's over halfway full of light, we call it a gibbous. As we continue our orbit going counterclockwise, after the full moon, we start to see a little bit of the shadow pop back up. Despite the fact that the moon is still illuminated by the sun, we're starting to see the shadow side because of the angle we're looking at. Because the light is on the left side, we call it waning, and because it's over halfway full of light, we call it a gibbous. We're almost all the way through our moon's orbit, which means the moon phases are just about done. At this point, we only see a very tiny portion of light on the left side. The left side means that it's waning, and the fact that it is less than halfway full of light means that we call it a crescent. And then we end up back where we began with another new moon.
Okay, let's say this is the moon orbiting the Earth. Once in a while, the shadow of the moon will fall on the Earth, and we get a solar eclipse. Okay, now then, once in a while, the shadow of the Earth will fall on the moon, and we get a lunar eclipse. Let me ask you this. Why don't we get one every month? An eclipse every month? Because the orbit of the moon is tilted. So, once in a while the shadow falls on the moon, but most of the time the shadow misses. And we get a full moon and a new moon every month, no problem. Isn't that wild?
Uh-huh.
It's all because the moon's orbit has a little tilt.
Now, even at this scale, this is not going to be a very good indication of the size of the shadow during a solar eclipse. Because the moon is so far away from Earth, the shadow ends up being a little closer to this size. So to review, we begin with a new moon, where we do not see any of the sunlight reflecting off the moon. Then the light begins to increase on the right side, starting with a waxing crescent, meaning we see less than half of the moon being lit up. Once we get to half the moon, we have made it to the first quarter. Just before you reach a full moon, you have just a small portion of shadow on the left side. This is a waxing gibbous. Eventually, you get to a full moon, where the entire moon is being illuminated by the sun. After a full moon, the light begins to decrease we end up with a waning gibbous. Once you've reached the halfway point again, we call this a third or last quarter. As the sunlight continues to disappear to the left side, we end up with a waning crescent. And those are the 8 phases of the moon.